Okay, welcome to the training on Rider G, the short sale approval contingency to the FARBAR contract. So, um, agents come at this from many different perspectives. One, knowing a great deal about short sales, knowing absolutely not what a short sale is, and having no clue, and all points in between. So, I'm going to attack it to make sure you understand the concept of a short sale. In a nutshell, a short sale contingency means that any contract that has been placed on, then all parties know, the seller, buyer, and all agents acknowledge that the amount that's on the contract when commissions and all the closing costs are paid, there will not be a sufficient amount in equity to pay off the existing mortgage or mortgages. So the seller is going to attempt to negotiate with the lenders, whether they be one lender, two lenders, or three lenders, to gain approval for them to accept less than what is owed to them in its entirety in order to release their liens on the property so that they can transfer title. Now, back before 2007, 8, and 9, when this first came on the scene, the answer was no way was that going to happen. The lender would say, well, if you don't have enough to pay us off, either bring the extra money to closing or we'll foreclose on you. Well, when it became evident that foreclosing was going to be more expensive than taking a shorted amount of what they're owed and a lot less time consuming for the bank, they decided to make an executive decision and start accepting these short sales. It initially started out where the seller had to prove some sort of financial hardship, job loss, medical conditions, whatever the case may be, to prove that it had to be a hardship letter, and those are the things that can be talked about with your short sale negotiator and or the title company who will be helping negotiate with the lender to obtain a short sale approval from the current lien holders, i.e. the banks. So because of that, all parties need to be made aware that going in that the amount that is being offered by the buyer that the seller is technically accepting is not sufficient to pay off all the liens, therefore, and the seller doesn't have the money to bring to closing, or quite frankly is unwilling to bring money to closing. And so any offer that they're making is still contingent upon the bank accepting less than what they're owed. All right, and that's what this is going to say. We're going to read through this. It is very self-explanatory. I have some kind of overall highlights, some of the stuff I've discussed already here, so make sure you read through that. And then, as always, once again, I encourage you to have a copy of this in front of you and or print it out so you have it right there with you, or pull it up on your screen. Okay, so as we go through, I'm going to pretty much almost read this because it is, like I said, it's pretty self-explanatory. Paragraph 1 just basically says that this contract is contingent upon A, the seller's lenders and all other lien holders, collectively called seller's lender, could be 1, 2, 3, or 8 lien holders, approving the purchase price, terms of this contract, and the HUD-1 settlement statement or the closing docket, the disclosure, and B, the seller's lender's agreement to accept a payoff, which is less than the balance due on the loan or other indebtedness, what we talked about earlier. And C, seller's lender agreement to release and provide a satisfaction of the mortgage and other liens encumbering the property, i.e. the buyer would not want to take ownership of the property, especially if they're getting financing. The new bank is going to say, no, I'm not going to do it unless we're now in first position, so we need this old lien addressed one way or another. Okay, so that's there. The approval of or agreement to items A through C by seller's lender is referred to going forward in this rider as a short sale approval. However, an approval by the seller's lender which does not provide a waiver, because we can talk about what is considered a short sale approval, if it doesn't waive them and release them from any claims down the road for the amount that they're short against the seller, that basically if the seller is not satisfied with the terms of which the bank comes back and says, yes, we'll approve this price or we'll release the lien if these three things happen, again, the seller's not 100% satisfied, then that would, potentially push them into this paragraph to say, hey, look, that's not satisfying what we would deem as a short sale approval in our eyes. while we're here, if you do represent a seller who's going through this and you're using this form, make sure when a short sale approval comes in that you literally just hand that or get that to the seller, and they need to satisfy themselves of the ramifications at the end, or we talked about up here earlier to make sure, I think it was number 4, if you look up here, was the seller must seek tax and legal counsel outside of the real estate agent to understand the ramifications of pursuing and obtaining a short sale. Because there may be tax ramifications down the road, even though they may not owe the amount. Let's say it was 80,000 they were short, they may not owe the 80,000, but they may be taxed as if they made that 80,000. And so these are items that you as a real estate agent are not qualified to make a judgment on, so you need to make sure that they seek the proper people to do that. All right, number 2 just says that the seller is going to make an application for their short sale. They may have already, but whenever the effective date of this contract is, then the seller is going to go to work. Make sure, again, it defaults to 10 days. You can negotiate whatever you want in there, that they'll make short sale application and shall diligently return all the items that the seller's lender is requesting within 5 days after that, and continue to provide documents to pursue the short sale. Seller authorizes seller's lender to provide the buyer's closing agent with information regarding the status. How's the short sale process coming? Because remember, what's going to happen is the lender in general is going to send out their own, what they call a person to do a broker price opinion that's going to come out and give a value. If, let's say, for instance, the purchase price is $200,000 and this person bought it at the height of the market, it's only worth $200,000 today. It's not in the best shape. Seller's not been doing well. They've had some medical issues that have caused them, to miss some payments and or behind on payments. They're slow. They haven't been able to do required maintenance on the home. It's starting to dwindle a little bit. So it's only probably worth $200,000 in its current condition. By the time they pay commissions, doc stamps on the deed, title insurance, and all the such, you're probably looking at they're going to net around 182. Well, you look at it and you see that they owe, let's make it nice and simple, 232. Well, there's $50,000 gap there. So we got to get the lender to accept 182 instead of 232. And that's not always easy to do, but the lender's going to send their person out there and say, yep, it's only worth 200,000 at best, probably 195 if we sold it in a foreclosure. Now it's going to take us 180 days to foreclose, so we're going to be missing all that. Plus we're going to have to hire our attorneys, and that's going to cost us 20 grand. And so by the time they say, hey, look, we're much better off just taking this current deal that's on the table. And that is, my friends, why a lender might accept and consider doing such a thing. All right. But because of that, they want to make sure what's going on, right? That they better off to foreclose, or are they better off to accept a short sale? Because they are a business and that's what they're going to do. And that's what they have time to do it, and they're going to have to keep us posted as where they are in that process. All right. Number 4, short sale approval deadline. We're going to say, hey, look, we're going to give you we're not going to give you forever to get this done. All right, it's going to default to 90 days. That's all fine. If you do represent a buyer in this case, I would probably put other verbiage in here that anytime prior to short sale approval, okay, as defined in here, buyer may cancel the contract and move on. Sellers may not like that. If I'm representing a buyer, though, and all of a sudden I don't want to lock myself in, because right now you're locking yourselves into 90 days. And if the seller gets the short sale approval on day 89, then you've got 45 days to close it after that. If your buyer's patient enough, that's great if they're getting a good deal. But let's say instead of day 89, on day 60, they find a home across the street that they like much, much better. You need to have some type of out, in my opinion. That this contract in of itself, this rider does not provide that, but somewhere else you would write in, hey, look, should anytime prior to short sale approval being received by buyer may cancel this contract, receive a full refund of their earnest money, and satisfy all obligations under the terms of this contract, something like that, just to get themselves out. But note that it's 90 days in here. You can negotiate shorter, you can negotiate longer, whatever the case may be. It does say that it'll automatically terminate if the short sale approval to buyer within 30 days after expiration of the short sale approval deadline, including extension. So even if neither party has actually canceled up here or exercised that right, it'll automatically cancel 30 days after this date here. okay, if there still is no short sale approval. All right, time for making the initial deposit. This is kind of important. The time for making the initial deposit and calculating is computed from the effective date, all right, and the short sale approval. This date up here is going to start ticking when the contract is executed. All other time periods and obligations, like loan approval deadline, home inspection, and all that stuff, shall start when the buyer is in receipt of the short sale approval referenced up here. Meaning, we go to contract, let's say March 1st. We need to have the earnest money in within 3 days, so we put the earnest money in. All right. However, we've got 90 days to get loan approval or short sale approval, and let's say it finally rolls in on April 28th. Well, April 28th then would start a new clock as far as the home inspection needs to be done within 10 or 15 days, whatever's been negotiated. The loan approval deadline starts on that date, and so on and so forth. If this is how you're going to do it, that's fine. All right, not a problem. But I would even consider doing a smaller earnest money deposit, like $1,000 now at the effective date, and then another $4,000. Let's say they want a total of $5,000, another $4,000 within 3 days of short sale approval. And you could write that back on the original FARBAR contract, because there's a spot for additional earnest money deposit. Okay. Closing date. The closing date shall be, if you leave blank, then 45 days after the receipt of the short sale approval. So there is no necessary date. You might have a date on the original contract. We all know that any riders or addendums supersede the contract. So if you have April 30th, on there, but you've got a loan approval deadline of April 30th, and you get a short sale approval on April 29th, then automatically it says the closing date's going to be 45 days after that. Okay, on or before it can happen. Cool. All right, whether or not the seller can accept backup offers. If you're a seller, here's what's got to realize that. So a seller gets an offer in, it's less than what's owed. They throw it up to the bank. The bank may be sitting there on it saying, I don't know if we want to take a $50,000 bath. So let's hang out and see. In the meantime, if the seller has the right to accept other backup offers, then they get another offer in that's only going to have the bank, have to take a $40,000 bath as opposed to $50,000. Then it's pretty simple. The bank's going to reject the first offer as far as, hey, no, we're not going to reject that, take that $50,000 loss as a short sale, but we will do the $40,000. So then the first one, it gets rejected, which therefore would cancel that first contract. And then the second contract or the backup contract would kick in. If you are the buyer and you're going to be that patient, I would encourage you to check box A, where the seller agrees not to accept other contracts or offers. If you're the seller, you want as many in there as possible, even if they're backups, you can keep throwing them to the bank and maybe you get something better that's not going to cause the seller to take as big a bath. Now, sometimes people say, well, the seller's going to take a bath. Who cares how big a bath? Well, the answer is you need to talk to your tax person, because there may be tax ramifications based upon how big a bath the seller has to take. And there's a couple acknowledgments by the seller and by the buyer. If they get refused by the lender, they have to agree to immediately notify the buyer and the buyer's agent, and that they are, again, advised to consult with any tax, legal, or specialized advice regarding that. So they're not going to hold us responsible. 9, the buyer acknowledges that the lender is not a party. The bank does not have to sign this contract. Only the seller does. The bank has to approve the short sale. There's a difference. But the bank does not have to sign this contract or approve this contract. All right? And the lender is under the lender could go silent and just say, hey, look, I'm not going to approve a short sale. I'm going to go to foreclosure. That is the lender's right. And if the buyer needs to be prepared to be patient, and or that's why you should write the verbiage in there that anytime prior to short sale approval being received by the buyer, by the seller and delivered to the buyer, then the buyer can cancel the contract anytime by giving a written notice so they can get out. If they sense that the seller's not making a good faith effort to get their short sale, or the lender's just not negotiating at all, they're being stubborn, then it's time to move on. Then the buyer, you want to have the right for your buyer to get out of this and move on. Okay? And that the buyer acknowledges that the seller and the broker and everybody else are not responsible for any delays, all right? And that got to take that up with the lender. And just know going in, if you're a buyer of a short sale or a agent representing a buyer, just make sure you properly communicate with them. Have them watch this contract class for all I care, so they can understand this addendum and how it affects them, how it affects the seller, and so on and so forth. And finally, the other thing, it's a bummer, all right, is that if the property ends up getting foreclosed on, the bank just sticks their heel in the sand and say, hey, you know what, we're better off just foreclosing. Then anytime if that foreclosure occurs, then they could, that would cancel this contract. Buyer receives their money back and they move on. That's great, but they've also wasted 48 to 90 days. Who knows how long waiting for that approval to come in. So that could, again, your buyers need to understand that going in. All right, so that would be part of it. We went through a phase from 2009 through 2013 where we saw a ton of short sales. They've kind of waned off because the economy's gotten better and people we started seeing equity in homes again and so on and so forth. But you never know when this will pop back up. We are seeing a few of them now, so it just depends. So bear that in mind, but be prepared and have yourself armed and ready if you do need to go for a short sale. And remember, which party you're representing depends on how you're going to complete this contract and where you're going to try and help negotiate longer periods or shorter periods based upon the party you represent. Hope this helps. As always, if you have any questions, let us know. Thanks and have a great day.